So if you've ever bet or traded on a football match, you will see a little box that comes up, and in that box you will maybe see a position of the ball, and you'll see dangerous attack, shot on goal, corner, free kick, all of those sort of things. But did you know that there's an army of people out there gathering and relaying that data? And a few years ago, somebody came and worked for me, and his previous job was actually a football data scout. And the conversation with him was really revealing and interesting, so much so that I said to him, can you write a blog post about it? And it turned out to be one of our most popular blog posts that we ever wrote. So popular that one of the companies that provides this service tried to get us to take it down. However, we didn't, and this video is a transcript of the conversation that I had with this guy. And it's a revealing insight into exactly what the life of a football data scout is like. So what does a football data scout actually do?
Basically, you're sitting inside the stadium, reporting what's happening in the match in real time. The company I worked for supplied live sports data to bookmakers, betting exchanges, and other companies within the betting industry. They'd send people like me to matches with a small mobile device. As things happened on the pitch, I'd enter them into the device and that information would be transmitted back.
So when we're betting and trading and you see those things that say dangerous attack, that's not some fancy sort of technology. That's actually you sitting in a stadium.
Exactly. You're effectively describing the match through data. You've got commands for things such as safe possession, attacks and dangerous attacks. Then obviously you've got the more definite events. Throw-ins, free kicks, corners, shots, yellow cards, red cards, penalties, substitutions and goals. You're basically following the match continuously and recording what happens.
That's quite interesting from a betting or trading perspective, because certainly when you were doing it, I think there was this impression that it was some sort of slick technology, but in fact it was really just you sat in the stadium looking up to see if somebody had passed the ball forward and then pressing a button on a device.
Yeah. It was a real person watching the game, and you've got to concentrate because the information needs to be accurate.
So it's important to understand here as well, I suppose, that really, as well as just being for the guy that's sitting at home, it could be used operationally as well, because back when Betfair was first created, I remember they had an ops centre where people would just sit and watch the matches and suspend and unsuspend them based upon what they could see. But of course, this sort of thing would take that over. Operationally, companies could use this to manage all of their markets automatically, because they no longer need guys watching a match because you're doing it. But of course, when you see data is unavailable or something suspends unexpectedly, then it's probably something that's actually going on at the match itself with that data collection, I guess.
That's right. If there's a connection problem, suddenly the information isn't getting through. And when I was doing it, if my connection went down, I'd actually receive a phone call.
So I guess you're sort of saying that, the Wi-Fi drops you or you're unable to transmit the data. What happened at that point?
You'd try to reconnect the device, but while you're doing that, you'd have to commentate down the phone. So I'd be sitting among supporters saying things like safe, attack, dangerous attack, shot on goal, goal kick, and so on.
I bet there were times when that really sort of, was getting pretty awkward.
It could be very awkward, especially if you're surrounded by home supporters and the away team scores. You've suddenly got to announce down the phone that the away side has scored, say who scored, and give the new score. Meanwhile, everybody around you is obviously not particularly happy about it. And the person on the other end might be saying, "Can you repeat that? You'll have to speak up." So you're basically providing commentary while sitting amongst a load of annoyed football supporters.
How did you actually get the job in the first place?
I was trying to make a living from Betfair trading at the time and was looking for some part-time work. Saw an advert online for football scouts and applied. An area manager contacted me, explained the job, and then I went through the training.
Was it difficult to get started? Was there much training involved?
More than you might imagine. First, you had to learn how to operate the device and all the commands and procedures. That took me roughly a week. Then they gave me recorded football matches to practice on. I'd report the first half, they'd review what I'd done and point out mistakes. After I'd done a couple more matches successfully, I was ready to attend a real game.
So you couldn't rock up to Old Trafford with a phone and just start sending them data?
No. You had to know exactly what you were doing. Once I was approved, the device arrived in the post, along with the login details. I'd log in and there would be a selection of matches available in my area. That could be anything from higher profile matches to lower leagues, women's football or reserve games.
Did they give you a ticket?
No, and that surprised me. I had to buy the ticket myself. You'd also have your travel costs. Expenses were covered, but obviously you had to pay some of that money up front and wait to be reimbursed. At the time I was getting about £50 for covering a match.
I'm assuming accuracy was really important.
Definitely. It was performance related. Minor mistakes weren't necessarily disastrous if you followed the correct procedure and fixed them, but there were serious errors which could result in you not being paid. Missing something like a goal, penalty or red card was obviously a big problem, and reporting a goal for the wrong team was definitely something you didn't want to do.
I'm assuming from the way that you said that was something that did actually happen, that you did actually do?
Unfortunately, yes.
Go on then, you've got to give me that story.
I'd become pretty confident by this point. My reporting had been good and I'd started covering more matches. I was doing as many as 5 games in a week. Then one day, I decided to cover 2 reserve matches on the same day. One kicked off at 2 and the other at 6.
Which immediately sounds like something's going to go wrong.
Of course. I arrived at the first ground and discovered kick-off had been delayed because one of the team coaches had broken down. An hour went past and they still hadn't arrived. At that point I should have phoned the company and told them there was a problem, but I thought I'd take the chance. Eventually the team arrived and they got the match started, but now everything was incredibly tight.
So now you've ended up watching the clock as well as the match.
Exactly. Towards the end of the match, I'm getting my things together and starting to move towards the exit. There are only a couple of minutes left. I've got my phone out checking the time and I'm working out whether I can make it to the next ground. And while I'm distracted, a goal goes in.
Oh no.
I quickly hit the goal command. Then I realised I'd awarded it to the wrong team.
So I'm assuming there's a proper procedure for correcting that.
There was. And the sensible thing would have been to own up immediately. Unfortunately, that's not what I did.
So what did you do?
I thought I could fix it without anybody noticing. There were hardly any spectators there. So I entered that the goal had been disallowed. Then I thought I'd put in a free kick, wait a few seconds, and then enter a goal for the correct team. In my head, I'd repaired everything.
I'm sort of guessing that there will be somebody at the other end looking at the data thinking, what on earth just happened there?
Exactly. A few moments later, the phone rang. They asked me to confirm that a goal had been scored, then disallowed, and then the other team had scored. I said yes.
I'm guessing they could see that there was something wrong.
The next day, I got an email from my manager asking about what had happened. At that point, I admitted everything. I wasn't paid for the match, and more importantly, I damaged the trust I'd built up. I'd had a very good record before that. I'd been getting more matches because they knew I was reliable. And suddenly I'd thrown all of that away, because instead of admitting a simple mistake, I'd tried to cover it up.
So we've heard the downside, a bit of negative stuff there. Was there anything interesting or funny that happened to you while you were doing this?
Yeah, this was probably the funniest thing that happened. I was covering a reserve match against Arsenal. There were only about 100 people watching. Towards the end of the first half, I noticed somebody a few rows in front turning around and looking towards me. It was Phil Brown.
Who would have then been the Hull City manager?
That's right. He looked at me, smiled and nodded. I naturally looked behind me to see who he was talking to, except I was on the back row. There wasn't anybody there.
So obviously you and Phil are best buddies then, I'm guessing.
Apparently. A few seconds later, he turns around again and says something like, "How are things?" I waited to see if somebody else answered. Nobody did. So I just said, "Yeah, good, thanks."
As you would.
Then he actually got up, came over and sat next to me, and started chatting.
So you weren't tempted at some point to sort of say, "Hey Phil, who do you think I am?"
Absolutely not. I'd got this far. I was going with it.
This is the same decision-making process that led you into that 6-second goal, isn't it?
Probably, anyway. It's half-time, so I've put my device away. Then I noticed some kids gathering around a couple of people who have arrived. It's Roberto Martinez and Peter Reid. Phil acknowledges them. They come over. They shake Phil's hand, and then they shake my hand.
Well, you're obviously best mates with Phil Brown.
Exactly. So presumably they're thinking I'm somebody from football, maybe another scout, a coach, an agent. Who knows? Then Roberto Martinez and Peter Reid sit down on the other side of me. So now I'm sitting there with Phil Brown on one side and Martinez and Reid on the other.
And of course, nobody knows that you're just there getting paid 50 quid to press dangerous attack on your device.
I'm hearing all sorts of conversations about football, players and managers. I'm thinking this is fantastic. I've somehow ended up sitting right in the middle of these people, and everybody apparently thinks I belong there.
Surely you've got a bigger problem in front of you here, in that you've got an entire half of this match to get through without revealing that you're a data scout.
That's when the panic set in, because I've got to get this device out and start tapping away again. And the moment I do that, Phil is probably going to realise he has absolutely no idea who I am.
So how on earth were you going to dig yourself out of this hole? What was the plan?
I was genuinely thinking I'd say I needed the toilet and then disappear somewhere else in the ground. Fortunately, I didn't have to. Some more kids came over looking for autographs, and Peter Reid suggested they should move somewhere else. They all got up, and Phil says something along the lines of, "Well, nice to see you again."
Again?
Again. They disappear. I pull the device back out and desperately catch up with the football. And to this day, I still have absolutely no idea who Phil Brown thought I was.
So if you've ever wondered why sometimes all of the score feeds go down at exactly the same time, or maybe one individual match doesn't get turned in play again after a goal or some significant event, now you know why. There's some guy there trying to get to the next match, or maybe the connection's dropped or something has gone wrong. And what can be defined as a technical error sometimes is down to just some of those simple facts of somebody at the ground is unable to relay that information. I think it has important implications for your betting and trading if you're relying upon this information. And this sort of activity goes on all around the world. Nowadays, it's evolved somewhat in that a lot of top tier teams often wear what can only be best described as like a sports bra, and that actually contains a transponder in it, which relays information to tactical and data providers at certain grounds. It's not universal at the moment, and in fact there are still data scouts at the ground to cross-check information and to do other things. But back when this person was doing it, it was purely individuals that did it. There was no technology. And there have been quite a few documentaries that I've seen around this sort of activity, because it's somewhat controversial in some of the lower leagues. Because obviously there's very few people in attendance. You have to rely upon the data that's coming from that particular ground. And that's where there's a little gap in terms of what people expect as to exactly what is going on at that particular level. But it's an interesting aspect of the industry. It's something that I think you should need awareness of. And I think that this video was pretty interesting, having a conversation with somebody who'd actually done it. And I hope that this video has been interesting for you.